How's it going, guys? Ever since I got my Canon R6, there's been a lot of questions asked to me about the camera. Do I like the camera? Do I like the R6? Do I like the R5? And then another question that's asked me all the time is what lenses should I get for the R6? So should I keep my EF lenses and get the adapter? Should I just spend all the money on getting, all the pretty expensive glass for the Canon RF system? And I think that question is super loaded because it really just depends on your experience level. Are you an amateur, a hobbyist, a professional? How much money are you willing to spend? What are you shooting? And the list goes on and on. However, I do think there is one lens that everybody who owns a Canon R6, R5, EOS R, whatever it is, can buy and be happy with, and it's not very expensive. And in my opinion, I think it's probably the most underrated lens in the entire Canon RF lens lineup. So as you can probably tell from the thumbnail, the lens that I am talking about is the 35mm 1.8 macro lens, and I absolutely love this lens. I bought this probably about 4 to 5 months ago, but to get into why I love this lens, first I think we have to talk about the 35mm focal length. The 35mm, in my opinion, is now my favorite prime focal length. It used to be the 50mm Nifty 50 1.8 when I used to shoot Sony. I had several lenses for that camera for the Sony E-mount, and still my favorite lens from that entire mount, or the one that I used the most and got the most time on my camera, was the Nifty 50, was the 50mm 1.8, and I actually never owned a 35mm before this one. And now I realize 35mm, in my opinion, is superior to 50mm. Yes, the Nifty 50, even for the RF mount, is like $200 or something like that, $300. However, I just think 35mm as a focal length looks really good, and I was specifically really impressed with it when I went to New York. When I was in New York, I pretty much had this on my camera, I would say 70% of my time there, and it worked really well for street photos with subjects. It worked really well for portraits, and it worked really well for like the urban landscapes. And that's the best part about this lens. It is extremely versatile. I was able to get street photos of just random people walking in the street, some nice like architecture, just like vibey type of photos, some really good night photos, especially since it is a 1.8 aperture. I'm able to use this in low light, no problem. And also because it has the lens stabilization, which I'll get more into later. And it also worked really well for landscapes. And one of the issues, being someone who enjoys shooting landscapes, is having 35mm shouldn't be wide enough or isn't wide enough for a lot of landscapes. However, I don't think this is true. If I have the 35mm on my camera, I can definitely get some decent landscapes. In this case specifically, it was urban landscapes, but I even took this out to the beach once here in Miami and got some decent shots with it as well. So I think if you're looking for a lens, whether you're a professional or an amateur, if you want something that's versatile that you can kind of just keep on your camera like at all times and be good with, I think this is the lens to go. And I think one of the other really, really good benefits about this lens is that it's so light. I mean, it's literally like the size, it's smaller than my hand, it's like the size of my palm. And it's really, really light. If you have this on your camera with like a Ronin or a gimbal, it's gonna feel really good. It's really easy to just walk around with, and I don't know, it's just a really comfortable lens. So I think the size, the usability of it, and that being paired with a 35mm, I think this is a phenomenal lens for anybody who has a Canon EOS R or RF mount camera can be happy with. To get into a few more details, something that I love about this lens that I'm pretty sure the Nifty 50 doesn't have is the lens stabilization. So for $500, you might be asking like, why is this more expensive than the 50mm 1.8? And I think one of the main reasons has to be the stabilization in the lens, which makes me really happy because if you haven't used a EOS R camera that has the in-body stabilization paired with the RF lens that has the lens stabilization, it's actually ridiculous what you can do with it. I'll put a picture on the screen right now. I shot like a handheld long exposure of the Manhattan Bridge when I was in New York, and I was able to do like, I think like a 5 second, no, it wasn't 5 seconds, it was probably like 2 second exposure, handheld, and it's all because I was pairing it with this lens and with this body. And I love that. Another great thing about it, you have your autofocus and manual focus selector on the lens, and you also have your control ring. And I love having the control ring and the RF mount on lenses, because for a while I actually didn't know what I was going to use the control ring for, because I have all of my exposure controls in the palm of my hand, and I didn't feel like I needed a redundancy to put something here. But actually I ended up putting my focus selector here because I do change focus modes a lot for some reason. It's just the way I shoot, especially when I'm doing street photography. I'm constantly changing my mode selector, and now I can do that with just the twist of this ring here, instead of going through like the menus on, you know, the way I have my camera button layout set up. And the one thing that I will say that I absolutely hate about this lens, and I wish Canon would have just spent a little bit more money and I would have paid a little bit more money, is there is no actual weather seal. It's not going to focus on it, but there is no weather seal on this lens. So it's not a weather sealed camera, which is really unfortunate, because it's almost like really good, but at the same time, this isn't like an L series lens. So I guess they had to cut the corner somewhere, and they decided to not make it weather sealed, but I wish they did, because honestly, overall, this lens is great. Picture quality is amazing. You know, I have no complaints with sharpness, even at 1.8. Vignetting is super easily corrected in post. And yeah, I think overall, if you're looking for, if you have a Canon R6 or R5 or anything like that, and you're just looking for a lens to buy, you know, it is $500, which is relatively cheap with the rest of the Canon RF glass. I think if you're looking for a lens that you want to use as your everyday shooter, I think with this, you're pretty much good to go. You can also pick up like the Samyang 85mm, which I sometimes use, but I prefer this over the 85mm all day and over a 50mm as well. In my opinion, it's great. Something I didn't touch on, it also has macro capability. I don't shoot any sort of macro photography. Really, sometimes I'll like take photos of food or like little things like that, but normally I'm never at 1.8 shooting super up close to a subject, so I can't really speak on it, but it does have macro capabilities, which I think is cool. It just like adds to the versatility of the lens. So yes, overall, super happy with it. I just want to make this quick video to kind of just talk about it and give my thoughts on it, and you know, hopefully help some of you decide whether you want this lens or not. And overall, I gotta say, yes, I highly recommend it, and I would buy it again and in a heartbeat, honestly, especially since it's $500. You know, not that that's cheap, but I definitely feel like I can use this and kind of like give it some wear and tear, not be so stressed about it, and not have like, you know, a $2,000 lens on my camera at all times. All right, guys, that's gonna be it. Hope you enjoyed the video. I know it was quick, but I just wanted to give a quick rundown on it, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace, guys.